Hi, welcome to another episode of How to Do Atkins Low Carb. My name is, of course, Kent Altena, and this week's episode has to do with artificial sweeteners. And I realize that some people's problem is they like to potentially have too many artificial sweeteners in your diet. And if you want to see my video about that, check out my daily limit of 3 artificial sweeteners or less video, in which I also deal with some of the same topic. But this one is, what are the acceptable artificial sweeteners, especially in light of a number of new ones coming out since the new Diet Atkins Revolution book came out back in 2002. And of course, everyone knows that Dr. Atkins recommended 2 out of that book. He recommended the sucralose, aka Splenda, and Saccharin. Once again, denouncing the myth that happened in the 70s regarding saccharin, that it causes cancer. Well, in the amounts that are acceptable within the Atkins diet, 3 servings or less per day, there's been no ever known case of cancer being caused by saccharin. Obviously, you also know that aspartame was discouraged in the book. When the book was released, stevia was also on the horizon, but was only approved as a herbal supplement and not approved as a food supplement or as a sweetener. So with that in mind, what has come out recently and what's advisable and what's potentially not advisable to have? Well, one of the things that has come out recently is obviously the approval of stevia as being a sweetener on the diet, and 2, the approval by the FDA of the stevia extract, the Ribana, which was developed by Cargill and Coca-Cola. And there's been a number of new products that have been released, as well as new actual end products that have included stevia or Ribana as being the sweetener. One of those happens to be Truvia, and the other one happens to be named Purevia. So if you're wanting to have a more natural sweetener or something that is developed out of nature, obviously that is one of your choices. Another choice of a sweetener that has come out of nature is obviously inulin or oligofructose. It's made out of roots or plants like the chicory root, and it's basically undigestible, similar to how fiber is undigestible. And it's actually included in a lot of kidney function tests because obviously if the body can't digest it, it has to be excreted out through the kidneys. So that's been included in a number of low-carb products, such as the Sweet Perfection chocolate bar. So if you're looking for a natural as opposed to artificial sweetener, inulin or oligofructose is another one. Xylitol is another naturally found substance made out of the birch tree bark. So there's another one, but one thing you got to be aware of with xylitol, it's also very dangerous to dogs. It will kill dogs. One more acceptable one that you might also see on a number of different products is ACE-K, asulfame potassium. And that's found in such things as Coke Zero, but it's usually not found strictly by itself. It's also tag teamed up with a different sweetener as well. Sometimes you also see it with Splenda, and it's that combination of the blending of the two that gives it the sweetness value. Just ACE-K by itself, I've never seen a product just have that sweetener in it. So that covers some of the acceptable ones. But what about the unacceptable ones? What are some that you potentially should stay away from? Well, let's deal with polyols, or sugar, also known as sugar alcohols. Let's deal with those. Well, sugar alcohols are neither sugar nor alcohols, but they contain their body structure similar to both of them. One of the more acceptable sugar alcohols is erythritol. That's the stuff that's also found in Truvia and is basically undigestible, similar to how inulin is also undigestible. And in comparison to a gram of sugar, it's 0.2 the calories of sugar. Now compare that to some of the other sugar alcohols like sorbitol or mannitol or maltitol. Those are basically 50 to 75% the digestibility of sugar. So basically 1 serving of those would equal about 50% of the digestibility or glucose that sugar would have. One of the other problems that these sugar alcohols, specifically maltitol and mannitol, is that because they're only 50% digestible by the bodies, one of the things that they happen to cause really in a number of different people is gastrointestinal issues. In fact, if they include too much of that within any product, they're required by the FDA to include that they may cause gas as well as diarrhea effects. So obviously, those are some of the more negative ones. Let's deal with some of the other ones. Well, some of the other new ones that are coming out is agave nectar. And basically that comes from the blue agave plant, the same stuff that makes tequila. And they reduce that down, they pulp the inside out, and make a sweetener out of it. Well, they like to promote that it's really low glycemic because it's all basically fructose. Unfortunately, fructose, while being very low on the glycemic index, it's about 25, where normal table sugar is 50. However, it's because it requires to be digested by the liver. One of the diseases it causes, if in diets that are high in fructose, a disease called fatty liver. And that's one of the negatives about the high fructose corn syrup. Other people might say, well, honey's natural, that must mean it's good. It also has the same problem that the agave nectar does, is it's very high in fructose. And finally, there's also been some other artificial sweeteners that have come out called Whey-Lo. Well, what Whey-Lo has in it is not only does it have sucrose and glucose in it, it also has lactose in it. All three of those which are simple sugars. And they rely upon the lower glycemic index to give a lower net impact carb rating than just if it was glucose alone. And finally, there are certain products that also include very valid artificial sweetener items like Splenda or stevia, and then they combine them with regular sugar to potentially make them easier for baking. Sun Crystals happens to include regular cane sugar with stevia. Splenda for baking, or brown sugar Splenda, it combines regular Splenda with their full cane sugar extract. So basically it's combining artificial sweetener with the real sweetener to hopefully get a better product. Unfortunately, what it does is simply just adds sugar back into your diet. So I hope this helps. I hope this delineates some of the artificial sweeteners that you may see out there in the marketplace, and which ones are more advisable to have and which ones are less advisable to have. And as my other video says, on a low-carb diet, you should be focusing on real foods. You should be focusing on foods that your grandmother would recognize. Not so much trying to get artificial sweeteners within your diet, but if you do, make sure you limit them to 3 servings or less per day. Well, have a good week and good day.